Hey there! Silly Story here, bringing you another silly tale for everyone to enjoy. I was on my way to Florida, ready to celebrate my cousin's wedding when I saw him. My dead husband. Alive.
Nani?
Laughing. And with a woman who looked exactly like me. My breath hitched, the world around me screeching to a halt. Shock and betrayal twisted in my gut like a knife. Was this real? Had grief broken me? Or was the man I thought to be dead really here, strolling through the airport with my living, breathing doppelganger? Hurt gave way to rage. If he'd faked his death to run off and cheat, I wasn't just going to confront him. I was going to bury him alive myself. Story begins. Make sure to visit our YouTube channel. Show some love by hitting like, sharing it with someone you know, and subscribing so you can be part of this channel's journey. I was still wiping tears with my sleeve when I arrived at the airport, doing my best to look somewhat human. Oversized sunglasses helped, though I was certain I still resembled a raccoon that had lost a fistfight. My heart wasn't just heavy, it was lead, dragging me down with every step. After 5 years of marriage, losing Mike in that freak boat explosion felt like the final punchline in a cosmic joke I didn't find remotely funny. But life, as it turns out, doesn't care if you're ready to laugh. It doesn't wait for grief to catch up. It drags you along, kicking and screaming, right into situations you don't want to face. Like catching a flight you're absolutely not emotionally prepared for, to a wedding that should have been a celebration but felt more like a punishment. My cousin's wedding in Florida, of all places. Florida, where everything is perpetually sunny, people smile way too much, and life feels obnoxiously normal. Meanwhile, I was a walking disaster. My emotions stuffed into my chest like an overpacked suitcase threatening to burst open at any moment. Dragging my scuffed carry-on through Terminal B, I tried to focus on finding Gate 34. Simple enough task, right? Just follow the signs, get on the plane, and survive. But my brain had other plans. Plans involving Mike. His crooked smile, the way he always smelled faintly of cedar and motor oil, his relentless optimism, even when life threw curveballs. Especially when life threw curveballs. I sighed, the weight of his absence pressing down on me, taking a sip of my overpriced airport coffee. I hoped the caffeine might kick me into some kind of survival mode. Anything to keep me from dissolving into a puddle of tears in front of a bunch of strangers. That's when I saw him. And I mean him. At first, it was just a glimpse. A tall man walking ahead of me, broad-shouldered, moving with that same awkward gait Mike had when he was in a hurry. You know, the one where he couldn't decide if he should power walk or break into a full sprint. His steps were slightly off-kilter, like he was constantly negotiating with gravity. I froze mid-step, my breath catching in my throat. My fingers tightened around the coffee cup, the heat searing into my skin. But I barely noticed. The back of his head was unmistakably Mike-shaped. You might think that's a weird thing to say, but trust me, I'd know it anywhere. There's something specific about the way his hairline curved, the slight dip at the base of his neck where my hand used to rest when we hugged. It wasn't just some random man who happened to look like him. It was Mike. My heart lurched, disbelief and hope crashing together in a messy, chaotic wave. My brain tried to logic its way out of it. It can't be him. Mike's gone. You saw the wreckage, the funeral, the condolences. You buried him? But my heart wasn't buying it. Mike, I whispered under my breath, barely able to form the word. He didn't turn around. Of course he didn't. He couldn't hear me over the hum of airport chaos, luggage wheels clattering, flight announcements echoing through the terminal. But I heard me. I stood there, frozen in place, torn between running after him and convincing myself I'd lost my mind. My heart was pounding so loudly it drowned out everything else. And just when I thought I couldn't handle any more shocks, I saw her. The young woman clung to his arm, laughing like they were in the middle of a perfect romantic comedy montage, the kind where everyone has flawless teeth and conveniently forgets that real life is messy. She couldn't have been older than 20, with long brown hair that swayed as she walked, catching the light. Her laughter was light and carefree, the kind that made my stomach twist in knots. Who the hell was she? A niece? A friend? Or something worse? My mind raced through the possibilities, each one more unsettling than the last. Maybe she was some distant cousin I'd never met, or maybe Mike had taken on a secret life I couldn't even begin to comprehend. My eyes darted to the woman walking next to them, and that's when my heart truly stopped. She looked just like me. Not, oh, she has my vibe, or wow, we share a resemblance. No, she looked exactly like me. Older, sure mid-50s, maybe, but unmistakably me. The same high cheekbones, the same stubborn chin that Mike always joked could cut glass when I was angry, and her eyes, stormy blue, The same shade that betrayed every lie I ever tried to tell. She clutched her purse tightly, her knuckles white, like she was holding on to more than just the leather strap, like she was holding on to reality itself. I felt like I'd stepped into some bizarre, alternate reality funhouse where mirrors didn't just reflect, they messed with your mind. My breath caught in my throat. I stared at her, then back at him, my brain short-circuiting under the weight of too many impossible thoughts. What in the multiverse? I murmured, my voice barely above a whisper. My fingers gripped the handle of my carry-on, squeezing it like it was the only thing tethering me to reality. I wanted to believe I was hallucinating. Maybe I hadn't slept enough. Maybe grief, in its relentless cruelty, was pulling one final trick on me. After all, it wouldn't be the first time grief had left me questioning my sanity. But this wasn't flickering or fading. The scene in front of me was as solid as the tiled floor beneath my feet. It was real. Too real. 1,000 emotions slammed into me at once: disbelief, confusion, anger. My heart pounded as if it were trying to escape my chest. My pulse thudded in my ears, drowning out the bustling sounds of the terminal. But beneath all of it, something else bubbled to the surface. Hope. It was small, fragile, and almost too painful to acknowledge. But it was there. What if Mike hadn't died? What if this was a second chance? A miracle twisted and tangled in a mess of secrets I hadn't been ready to face. I didn't know what was real anymore. But in that moment, I knew one thing. I wasn't leaving this airport until I had answers. Without thinking, I started walking toward them. Each step felt heavier than the last, my pulse thundering in my ears. I didn't know what I was going to say. Hell, I wasn't even sure I could speak, but I had to know. I had to find out who they were, and why they looked so much like ghosts from my past. Step 1: spy mode activated. I ducked behind a souvenir stand, wedging myself between a rack of I Red Heart New York shirts and a shelf of overpriced snow globes that were probably dust magnets in disguise. My heart was pounding so hard I was convinced the couple next to me, debating over keychains, could hear it. I tried to steady my hands, but they trembled as I peeked through the t-shirt rack, my brain refusing to process the impossible scene unfolding just a few feet away. Could it be a coincidence? No. The world isn't that big. Not big enough for two people who look like Mike to exist. Not big enough for two people who look like me. I pressed my back against the rack, the cold metal digging into my spine as I tried to slow my breathing. Deep breaths, Rachel. In, out, in, out. Mike used to say that to me all the time when I got worked up about something. Calm, rational Mike. Meanwhile, here I was, half hiding behind a rack of souvenir t-shirts, shaking like I'd just seen a ghost. Maybe I had. I peeked again, heart thudding in my chest. There he was, Mike, alive, real, laughing. But how? I glanced down at my phone, my fingers fumbling to open the camera app. Focus, observe, analyze. That's what Mike would have told me to do. The problem was, my brain was spinning in a million directions, none of them making any sense. I zoomed in, my thumb sliding awkwardly on the screen, and snapped a picture. The shaky image appeared, and my breath caught. There he was, Mike, alive, and wearing flip-flops. Flip-flops. Mike hated flip-flops. Call them foot death traps. He said they were sprained ankle waiting to happen, not real footwear. He wouldn't even wear them to the beach, insisting on sturdy sandals with arch support. Yet here he was, alive, strutting through an airport in flip-flops, and the floral shirt. Oh, my God, a ridiculously loud, floral monstrosity that looked like it belonged on a discount rack at a tourist shop in Miami. The same Mike who used to roll his eyes at my floral couch pillows, calling them grandma decor, now had the audacity to parade around in that shirt. I stared, slack-jawed, as the man who once lectured me for wearing a clashing pattern scarf walked past security, like he didn't have a care in the world. Was this really Mike, or had he been replaced by some beach bum imposter, who actually liked Hawaiian shirts and foot death traps? I shifted my gaze back to the women with him. The young one clung to his arm, still laughing. The older one, my doppelganger, stood to his left, clutching her purse like it held the meaning of life. Everything about this scene felt wrong, surreal, like I'd fallen into an alternate reality where Mike wasn't dead, and he wasn't my Mike anymore either. My pulse quickened again. I needed answers, but for now, all I had were questions, and a shaky photo of my not-dead husband in flip-flops. My blood boiled. Half of me wanted to sprint over, rip those flip-flops off Mike's feet, and demand answers right there in front of gate 34. The other half was frozen, locked in place, unable to look away from the impossible scene. Mike alive, wearing flip-flops, accompanied by a younger woman and my older doppelganger. The absurdity of it all had my pulse thudding in my ears. My brain raced through every conceivable explanation, each one more bizarre than the last. And then her, the Rachel clone. She stood there with that infuriating calmness, her posture straight, her expression serene, like she had all the time in the world. She wasn't fazed, she wasn't sweating or panicking. Meanwhile, my heart was hammering like I'd just run a marathon while carrying my emotional baggage in a suitcase with a broken wheel. They were chatting, smiling, casual, relaxed, like they were heading to a tropical getaway instead of starring in the front row seat of my personal psychological breakdown. There was only one explanation. Time travelers. Had to be. Maybe Mike had come back from the future to fix something catastrophic. Maybe I was the one who had traveled through time and just hadn't caught up with myself yet. Or clones. Secret government clones. Maybe the real Mike was still dead, and this was a twisted experiment involving recreated versions of us. Maybe this was step one of some dystopian sci-fi plot, and I was next on the list. Or what if I was the clone? My head spun as I tried to reconcile the impossible. My late-night internet rabbit holes about conspiracy theories suddenly felt like research instead of indulgence. Alternate universes, government experiments. Was I really losing it, or just prepared? I pinched myself. Hard. Pain shot through my arm. Real. Very real. My mental spiral screeched to a halt when the gate attendant's voice crackled over the intercom. Now boarding. Flight 647 to Miami, gate 34. My pulse quickened. This was it. Mike, the younger woman, and the Rachel clone gathered their things but continued waiting for their flight. I watched, frozen in place for a split second. I had a choice. Stay on my flight, go to the wedding in Florida, and spend the rest of my life wondering if I'd finally cracked, or follow them. Florida could wait. Without thinking, I shoved my phone into my bag, adjusted my oversized sunglasses, and slipped out from behind the souvenir stand, my heart hammering in my chest. I needed a plan. And snacks. I found the food court and planted myself at a table with a giant pretzel, the kind big enough to double as a flotation device in case my life took yet another unexpected nosedive. It was either gnaw on this hunk of carbs or stress vomit in the middle of the terminal, and I was trying to minimize my public humiliation quota for the day. I took a giant, aggressive bite, chewing as if that pretzel had personally offended me. Then I whipped out my phone, my fingers moving faster than my swirling thoughts. Time to gather intel. If Mike thought he could stroll back into my life alive, wearing flip-flops and carrying a secret entourage, he was sorely mistaken. This was war, and I was just getting started. Step 2. Social media stalking. If there's one thing grief hadn't stolen from me, it was my ability to hunt down information online. Years of Facebook fights over family reunions had honed my skills to a razor-sharp edge. I knew how to dig deep, how to find people who swore they were off the grid but couldn't resist tagging themselves at a taco truck. My instincts were sharper than ever, and now they were all I had to cling to as the world turned upside down. I started with Mike's old accounts. His Facebook, last updated 1 month ago, was a digital graveyard of half-forgotten memories. A profile picture of us at a summer barbecue, grinning like we had all the time in the world. His Instagram was even worse, empty except for a single sunset photo caption piece. I stared at it for a long time, my thumb trembling above the screen. Peace, I asked. He wasn't resting in peace. He was out there, alive and rocking flip-flops, not a care in the world. When that lead ran dry, I turned my attention to the younger woman. She'd been way too carefree, laughing like life was a sitcom and she just landed the lead role. People like that, they're never careful. Tapping through my apps, I sifted through the digital haystack, narrowing down possibilities. It didn't take long, rookie mistake on her part. Her Instagram was public. Public. I mean, come on. If you're going to hang out with a possibly resurrected guy and a doppelganger, at least tighten your privacy settings. Her profile was exactly what I expected, perfectly curated. Selfies, latte, art, sunny beaches. I scroll through with the kind of vengeance usually reserved for finding a long-lost receipt or winning an argument 3 weeks after it ended. My pretzel got demolished in the process. Latte. Yoga pose. Sunset. Latte. Then I saw something that made me freeze mid-bite. The salty pretzel lodged awkwardly in my throat. A family photo. It was from a year ago, tagged with something generic like #FamilyTime. But that wasn't what stopped me. It was who was in the photo. Front and center, the younger version of the older Rachel lookalike. She had the same sharp cheekbones and fierce eyes, only softened by a warm smile. Next to her was a man I didn't recognize, but between them was a toddler. A toddler who was unmistakably me. My brain short-circuited. I zoomed in, squinting at the screen, hoping I was just overtired or hallucinating from too much caffeine. But there I was, chubby cheeks, bright blue eyes, The exact same mop of curly brown hair I used to have before flat irons and bad decisions. I was wearing the same yellow overalls I remembered from an old childhood photo. And the woman holding me, the one smiling like she had the whole world in her arms. My mother. My heart stopped. My stomach plummeted into free fall. This was impossible. I didn't have a sister. I barely had enough attention for one childhood. My mom always said I was the only miracle she needed. No siblings, no secret family. Just us. But this photo said otherwise. I sat there, stunned, the pretzel forgotten and the world around me dissolving into background noise. The food court buzzed with live kids whining, luggage wheels clattering, flight announcements echoing overhead, but I was frozen in time, staring at this impossible image. Who was this younger woman? Why did she have a photo of me as a toddler? And how did this fit with Mike being alive? 1,000 questions raced through my mind, colliding into each other like bumper cars. My thumb hovered over the screen again, this time with more purpose. I needed to know more. I had to know more. Fueled by confusion, pretzel salt, and the dregs of a sleep-deprived brain, I made my decision. No more hiding behind souvenir stands or Instagram deep dives. I was done lurking in the shadows of social media. I marched straight to gate 34 like a woman possessed. My heart pounded, my palms were sweaty, and my mind raced with possibilities I couldn't begin to unravel. None of it mattered now. Answers weren't going to fall into my lap. If I wanted the truth, I'd have to chase it down myself, no matter where it led or what it cost. This wasn't just about Mike anymore. This was about me, my past, my family, and a truth I wasn't sure I was ready to uncover but couldn't live without knowing. Step 3. Confrontation. Mike, I hissed, my voice cutting through the airport chaos. He was standing there, fumbling with a carry-on and a neck pillow that looked way too comfortable for a man who'd supposedly died in a boat explosion. His head snapped up, and the look on his face was priceless. His eyes widened like a kid caught sneaking cookies before dinner. Rachel, you're supposed to be at your funeral. Yeah. Surprise, I snapped, my voice laced with sarcasm and just the right amount of fury. I crossed my arms, tapping my foot for extra effect. Now explain why you're playing airport bingo with my doppelganger. His face went pale. For a moment, he just stood there, speechless. Good. Let him squirm. I deserved answers. And I wasn't going to let him weasel his way out of this one with some lame excuse about mistaken identity or a long-lost cousin. But before he could even stammer out a word, the older woman gasped. Rachel. I turned to her, my eyes narrowing. Her face was familiar in a way that made my stomach twist. She had tears welling up, her hand covering her mouth like she'd seen a ghost. What is happening right now? I blinked, caught off guard. How do you know my name? Her voice wobbled as she stepped closer, her eyes shining with emotion. Because I'm your twin sister, Lisa. We were separated when we were 3. The world tilted. My heart skipped a beat. And for a second, I forgot how to breathe. Twin sister. Separated at 3. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. I had so many questions, too many, but my brain couldn't keep up. Twin sister. This woman, the one who looked like an older version of me, but with more wrinkles and less patience. What? It was all I could manage. Lisa, my twin sister? Nodded, tears spilling over now. It's true. We were adopted into different families. Mom and Dad, they thought it was for the best. Her voice cracked, and she wiped her cheek. I've been looking for you for years. I stumbled back a step, my legs suddenly wobbly. This was too much. Way too much. I felt like I was in one of those over-the-top soap operas my mom used to watch. Any second now, someone was going to reveal they'd faked their death to inherit a fortune. Then the younger woman, Miss Rom-Com Giggles, stepped forward, looking sheepish. And I'm your niece, she added, her eyes wide and sincere. Mike didn't know how to tell you. So, we planned this meeting here. But, well, surprise. Surprise! I gawked at her, then back at Mike, who still looked like he might pass out at any second. My brain was screaming at me to process everything. Twin sister, niece, Mike alive. But all I could do was stare. Let me get this straight, I said slowly, my voice trembling with a mix of disbelief and rising anger. You're saying I have a twin sister and niece, and Mike, who I thought was dead, is part of some secret family reunion plot. And you didn't think to clue me in before today. Before I almost lost my mind in this airport. Lisa and the younger woman exchanged guilty glances. Mike finally found his voice, his words tumbling out in a rush. Rachel, I was going to tell you, I swear, but I didn't know how. And then Lisa reached out to me, and everything happened so fast. I held up my hand, cutting him off. Fast? Mike, you've been dead for weeks. You don't get to play that happened fast card. He winced, rubbing the back of his neck. Okay, fair point. I took a deep breath, trying to steady the whirlwind inside me. My head was spinning. My heart was breaking and rebuilding all at once, and I wasn't sure whether to scream, cry, or laugh. Let's start with one thing, I said, locking eyes with Lisa. Prove it. Prove you're my sister. Lisa nodded, her eyes softening. She reached into her bag and pulled out an old photograph. My breath caught as she handed it to me. It was a faded picture of two little girls, identical, wearing matching yellow overalls. Us. I clutched the photo, my hands trembling. The past I thought I knew suddenly felt like it had holes big enough to fall through. Okay, I whispered. Now what? Step 4. Connecting the dots. Turns out, Lisa had been looking for me for years. Years. The sister I never knew I had. Combing through records. Searching for a lost twin while I was blissfully unaware. Believing my life was complicated enough without hidden siblings. And then there was Mike. Of course Mike. Over the top, dramatic Mike. He'd stumbled onto Lisa thanks to a DNA test that linked us. One of those ancestry kits people buy on a whim, hoping to find out if they're part Viking. Instead, he found my actual twin sister. Naturally, he planned a big reveal. Mike never did anything small, but fate had other plans. The boat accident. Yeah, about that. It didn't happen. Apparently, Mike missed the trip because of a flat tire. A flat tire. I was grieving, spiraling into darkness, and all the while, he was dealing with roadside assistance. He tried to call me, but in the chaos of getting stranded and losing his phone, he had no way to reach me. Meanwhile, I was preparing to scatter ashes that didn't even exist. Then came the funeral. Premature. A little too premature, wouldn't you say? Everyone mourned, and Mike, he was alive, stranded in the middle of nowhere with no idea the world thought he was dead. As for the girl at the airport, the one I thought was some secret fling, Lisa's daughter, my niece. Not some dark plot twist involving an affair or a secret family. Just my family. I sat there, listening to Lisa and Mike explain everything over the course of several hours, my emotions swinging wildly between shock, relief, and a simmering kind of annoyance that only comes when life slaps you upside the head. Too many surprises? At one point, I wandered off to a churro stand because, honestly, I needed carbs to cope. When I came back, both Mike and Lisa were sitting there, looking at me with those cautious, hopeful expressions, waiting for me to say something. I sighed, wiping cinnamon sugar off my fingers. I need time to process this, I said finally, my voice steady but tired. Mike nodded, his eyes soft. Fair. Lisa gave me a small smile. Understandable. I stared at both of them, letting the weight of the moment settle over me. My husband alive. My twin sister real. My entire life flipped upside down in one surreal afternoon. And yet, I wasn't angry. Not really. But I wasn't letting them off the hook that easily. I crossed my arms, narrowing my eyes at Mike. But first, you owe me a honeymoon redo? With extra dessert. Mike blinked. Then his face broke into a grin. Deal. Lisa laughed softly, her eyes glistening with tears. And just like that, the tension cracked. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't simple. But it was ours. I had a twin sister. I had a niece. I had a very alive husband. And somehow, despite all the chaos and confusion, I knew I'd be okay. Because if I could survive pretzels, plots, and perfectly timed airport chaos, I could survive anything. Story ends. Thanks for listening. See you again for another silly story.